Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Haffenberg. I am the head of Movement Inside at Strawberry Frog. And today I am thrilled to talk to Roxana Shirkhoda, who is head of social impact at Zoom. So needless to say, this year has been a big one for Zoom. 2020, the world needed to hunker down at home, but still remain connected to work, school, family, and friends. So very glad to welcome Roxana. And before starting sharing your social impact report from 2020, let's talk a little bit about the role of purpose and how your organization experienced it before 2020. What was the purpose? How did you activate it internally amongst the employees and also externally?
Thanks so much for the question, Lisa. Purpose plays an incredibly significant role in the day-to-day work at Zoom. It's felt deeply through all of our employees. It particularly shows up in our work with our customers, and happy to speak to kind of overall what that has looked like in the last several years. I think a little known fact is that Zoom turns 10 this year. So for our 10th birthday, I think it's particularly relevant to share that for 10 years, our company has been really built on the foundation of delivering happiness. And to think about a company our size and with our global reach really centered on delivering happiness to people and really what that purpose means for everyone in the everyday work. I mean, it definitely brings a smile to my face. I don't know about you, but it's such a kind of core and fundamental part of our work. And Eric Yuan, our CEO, from day one, 10 years ago, made sure to embed a core value of care into our culture. If you ask anyone kind of how do we center ourselves or what are we focused on, it's caring. It's caring for our customers, it's caring for our teammates, it's caring for ourselves. And when I think about kind of the purpose of delivering happiness through our video communications platform and caring for everyone, including ourselves, I can't help but just feel that sense of purpose and that sense of inspiration and drive. And that's been part of our company for a decade now.
Well, I love that. That's fantastic. So if you take us through the events now of last year, 2020, so everything began to unfold in March, as we know. Did that reshape Zoom's purpose, or did you have to prioritize some of your specific initiatives, internal and external?
Yeah, of course, no one was prepared for what the pandemic would bring globally. You know, it was an incredible hard time, a tragic time, an unexpected time. And when I think about kind of how we have led with our purpose for several years, actually one example I'll share prior to 2020 is that, we as a company from early on were really focused on the education space. And, if I think about even to our earliest customers, one of our first customers was in the higher education space. And core to our focus was helping education achieve, education institutions achieve their outcomes and their impact at scale and deeper, leveraging our platform. And so when I think about, what happened when the pandemic hit in March, we really looked to our past to say, how are we going to show up right now in this moment? And it was a no-brainer for us to think about our trajectory in the education space and say, we're going to offer our platform for free to K through 12 institutions around the world to ensure continued learning, seamless transition to remote learning. And we know that was a really difficult time for parents, for teachers, for students. And if there was anything that we could do to remove that stress or that burden through our platform, it was an easy decision and one that we wanted to do to really support, folks going through the pandemic, especially when things kind of completely got thrown off in March of last year. I think another area I'll call out in terms of not necessarily reprioritizing our initiatives, but very much doubling down on them. In March, the senseless murder of Breonna Taylor, come May, the murder of George Floyd, our company had for so many years a really concerted focus on diversity and equity and inclusion. But really in 2020 is when we doubled down on that focus, and our diversity, equity, and inclusion team was formed. And the same goes for our philanthropic program, Zoom Cares. Our social impact work had for so many years been in play. Employees were donating funds, were volunteering. The company was making charitable contributions. But last year, again, was a no-brainer to double down on that work. And our social impact arm was formed, and the company distributed over $5 million of funding into the COVID relief ecosystem, as well as the racial justice ecosystem. So I'd say the events unexpected of 2020 really turned the volume up in a lot of ways in our education work, which had been around for quite some time, as well as our diversity and social impact work.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I know you also do have the social impact report as well. Any highlights from that you would like to mention?
Sure, happy to. So I think one incredible just number to share, as I talked about our support in the education space. So we supported over 125,000 education organizations with free access and unlimited access to our platform. And I really appreciate our data science and analytics teams for helping us get to this number that we supported over 95 billion minutes of learning last year. And we know that that wasn't easy. Again, it was a really difficult transition in some cases for folks to adapt in a new way. But we know through feedback and outreach from teachers and students that access to our platform made a huge difference. And, we share a lot of stories about that in our social impact report about how we were able to further learning outcomes. We also worked with some really incredible and resilient nonprofit organizations. I think that, last year pushed every service-based organization to think about how do they deliver services to the community that's really struggling. How do you do that remotely? How do you do that when you can't go in person to the people who are most in need? And for us, it was a huge responsibility to support those organizations, and to move, over $5 million from the company was key. But when I look at the report and I see there's a section where we talk about our employees, and I think it's a little over $450,000 of funds that our employees contributed out into the nonprofit space, and employees who found ways to volunteer their time to cook food for their community or to volunteer digitally using our platform. That's just what brings me the most amount of inspiration, is that during a time where our business was overwhelming, I might say, in terms of growth and pace. We went from 10 million daily meeting participants to 300 daily meeting participants. And when we think about the impact of that scaled growth almost overnight, it was felt throughout our business and for our employees. And I think that we were able to really balance that explosive growth in terms of serving, the global users who were dependent on our platform to stay connected day to day with, the response to the pandemic, with response to the cry for racial justice across the world. And, I think that explosive growth really just allowed us to actually further live into our purpose, and recognizing that we were impacting so many more people's lives. And we took that pretty seriously.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So continue talking about the purpose. How did purpose really act as a guide when you were dealing with all this? You talked about the unprecedented growth and these unprecedented business demands of last year, all the practicalities around it. How did the purpose guide you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think about purpose as, tapping into each individual's sense of inspiration and kind of their meaning, right? Like, why are they doing the work that they're doing? Are they connected to that work in a way that they feel makes a difference? And I think that there's this really beautiful relationship to working at Zoom and being able to see your work change people's lives. And I think that, as I just said, that folks were kind of overnight shifted to a remote work environment themselves. We, even though we are Zoom, have offices where people would go into the office and connect with one another, and had to shift to a remote workforce. Personally, folks had to deal with the implications of the pandemic as individuals before they were Zoom employees, let alone the growth of our company. And I think that sense of purpose and seeing the deep impact of our work and our platform on hundreds of millions of people around the world really helped folks push through, right? Like, people showed up day in and day out to ensure that our platform was working seamlessly. And I think an important thing to note is that, again, going back to our CEO, our founder, Eric, he made it incredibly clear to employees last year that this isn't a time to try and upsell our business or create some fancy marketing plan. It was a time to care for our communities and to recognize that our platform was connecting people who couldn't see their family members, who couldn't attend weddings, who couldn't celebrate birthdays, who were in some cases connecting with family members in the hospital that they couldn't go see in person. And that deep sense of connectedness to the community and that sense of, again, like, care being our deeply felt value, I think is what pushed through the unprecedented time and the real pressure, frankly, on the business.
Right. Yeah, it really sounds on you that the purpose is not just a nice something you have printed on the boardroom wall, but it's something that you're using in your day-to-day, in your practical business, in everything you do. So that's any other practical, in terms of practicalities, any other great examples you have how really the purpose is guiding you? Any tips for our viewers?
Sure. I mean, I think a really tactical thing, that just to your point, it's not something that's just written on a boardroom wall or in a pamphlet somewhere, is that, our leadership team reiterates the kind of message, if you will, and the core focus on delivering happiness and living, throughout our day-to-day with a sense of care repeatedly. It's not something that you might hear during your new hire onboarding training, or that, you might see if you're walking through the halls of the office. It's, we have biweekly company all hands, and every single meeting, our leadership team, Eric, our CEO, as well as other folks, say and talk about authentically, genuinely why these things matter, right? And what it looks like to do this work. They'll highlight examples of customer stories where we've gotten feedback. And, there's this really incredible culture. This is I'll say just kind of a funny, maybe quirk of Zoom. In addition to these, all hands meetings where you're going to hear and see examples and feel that sense of purpose, we have an incredible culture of chat, which might sound kind of funny if you think about, we're a global company, thousands of employees, a household name at this point. But we have this culture where folks chat with one another quite often internally. And, you've got 5,000 employees in some cases in some chat groups sharing examples of how our work makes a difference in people's lives, sharing examples of how they individually went out of their way to take care of someone in their community. And our entire executive team is in those chats. Managers are in those chats. Every single employee is in there, +1ing, heart emoji, really recognizing and applauding these examples and these day-to-day efforts. And it's a culture where we celebrate one another and we feel connected. And, frankly, I haven't met a single coworker or employee at Zoom in person since I've started. I have been virtual and remote. But through these venues of, our all hands meetings or in these chat group conversations, I feel that deep sense of connection and care. And I think for other companies to think about, how do you decentralize structures that make these types of conversations accessible, that make them informal, that make them feel, like they are part of the day-to-day, and not make them feel that way, but because they are part of the day-to-day, and that you naturally and organically allow employees to show up and express, that they care or that they're living in their day-to-day work with purpose, and celebrate it. And I think that that's something that our team does from top to bottom, side to side across the entire company.
So very quickly before we end, what are you the most excited about moving forward in this unpredictable, uncertain world of ours?
Yeah, there is quite a bit of uncertainty. Speak to this from my social impact lens, from overseeing our social impact work. There is quite a bit of uncertainty going forward, right? We still have a global focus as a company, and there are countries who are experiencing a second wave of the pandemic's effects of COVID-19's impact on communities. And I think what I'm most excited about is for all the learnings from this last year, right? How do we show up for folks even when we can't physically be together? How do we as a company rise to the occasion of an unprecedented pandemic? How do we as employees respect and trust one another's day-to-day lives being chaotic and challenging while having to show up for work? I think that all of those things for me, from where I sit, is what I'm most excited about, is to say, 6, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, if we're in this utopic scenario where we no longer have a pandemic and we've kind of created, a new day-to-day, that we're still thinking a lot about communities that are dealing with challenges, individuals who are dealing with challenges, right? The pandemic was an accelerant to those challenges that folks are experiencing. It didn't create entirely new ones. And so I think when we consider, racial justice work, access to education, just naming two that we care deeply about, I'm really thrilled to see that folks are making long-term commitments, and I'm excited for folks to stay true to those commitments, ourselves included.
Thank you so much, Roxana, on behalf of the Purpose Power Summit. We loved speaking to you today, learning more about how purpose has been such a core part of Zoom's success in the past and hopefully will be in the future as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa. Really great to be with you today. Take care.